Welcome in, everyone. I am your host, Andrea, with From Mrs. to Ms. I'm being joined by somebody very special with me here today, and I am very excited. You guys know I love to talk about dating and matchmaking, all of that. So I have none other than Steve Ward with me today. Hi, Steve. How are you?
I'm doing great, Andrea. Thanks.
Oh, amazing. So for you guys who don't know who Steve is the owner and CEO of Master Matchmakers. It is a premier high-end matchmaking and coaching service that has been guiding upscale singles into meaningful and sophisticated relationships for over 20 years. Master Matchmakers, originally founded by his mother, Joanne Ward, has become a trusted name in the relationship coaching industry, now operating nationwide under Steve's leadership out of Palm Beach, Florida. Steve is widely recognized for his no-nonsense approach to love and relationships, which earned him international acclaim as the host and executive producer of VH1's hit series Tough Love. Over 6 seasons, wow, that's awesome, from 2009 to 2013, Steve and Joanne helped transform the lives of countless singles by teaching them how to cultivate healthy, lasting relationships. In addition to his television success, Steve is the author of Crash Course in Love, a refreshingly honest and practical romance guide for women, published by Simon & Schuster. His thought, leadership, and expertise have made him a sought-after voice in the world of dating and relationships. Wow, wow, wow. That's a lot.
That's a great intro. Thank you.
You're welcome. It's yours.
Yeah.
I love it. No, that's amazing. So, okay, I want to start at the beginning with you because we mentioned that your mom, Joanne Ward, she founded the company Master Matchmakers. And I saw you were on Jimmy Fallon a few times, and you mentioned on there, this is all you knew from a very young age.
Sure.
It's like how you grew up. So did you always just kind of know you wanted to follow in her footsteps? Did you ever go in a different direction? How'd you end up here?
I went to Drexel University where I studied finance and economics, and I thought I was going to go into banking right out of school. But
banking it, you didn't.
Yeah, well, I just noticed that my mom was doing things the old-fashioned way still, and this was in 2003. She didn't have a website. She didn't have a database. She was doing everything through filing folders and Rolodexes. And,
oh my gosh,
it was just a really crazy way for her to manage a business. And I knew that she could do a better job of it if she had a little bit of information technology at her fingertips. So I originally was just planning on being involved short term. I didn't think that I would end up making a career out of this. But I got her a website. I got her a database. We got on search engines. Next thing you know, we're getting clients all over the place, and the business really took off.
Oh my God, I love that. So, okay, how has the matchmaking industry kind of evolved then over the last decade? Because you've been there since really the beginning. How has it changed, especially with these dating apps? I mean, has that hindered the business, or are people still like, I'm not doing the dating app, but this, I believe it?
Interestingly enough, I think that I've been doing this for more than 2 decades now. And so I tell you that the matchmaking industry really evolved from 2005 to 2015.
Okay.
That's when you really started to see people become much more, I would say, accustomed and familiar with online dating in general. It was really the transition from doing it on a computer to doing it on a mobile app, which really changed the game. And that was pretty much around 2007 and 2008 when the iPhone and the Android were invented respectively. So you had these mobile apps that allowed people to be able to start meeting others without having to be strapped to a computer at home, which most people had lives. They were working 9-to-5 jobs. They had kids. They really didn't have the availability as much as they did once the apps were on their phones. And then you had the invention of like Tinder in 2012, 2013. And that's really when it started to take off. And so for the last 10 years, there's just been a lot more acceptance of online dating and mobile dating as the primary way to meet somebody. So it went from being kind of taboo and nerdy to be online dating to now people feel like it's the only way you can meet someone.
Interesting. So matchmaking, people consider a lot like just like an online app dating rather than an organic dating. Is that what you're kind of saying there?
Well, no, I mean, matchmaking as an industry in itself has pretty much remained the same over the last 20 years, where you have people that are involved in the introduction process whose job it is to bring others together for the purpose of romance. But
Mm.
there's different types of matchmaking services that exist out there, and not all of them are the same. Some of the more popular ones that have gotten to scale, and by scale I mean they're doing anywhere from 10 million to 20 million a year in revenue,
Wow.
are ones that, believe it or not, are blind dates. And I wouldn't trust my best friend to set me up on a blind date, much less hire a stranger to do it for me.
Right.
But they will argue that it's so that you can respect the integrity of the matchmaking process. You're supposed to trust the professionals. They set you up on the date, tell you when and where to go, and you just show up and it's sink or swim. Uh,
Mm.
that's not how
Kind
we.
of sounds fun. I mean, kind of.
It can be fun, I think.
Depends on the person you meet.
100%. But I think it has a lot to do with, what you're looking for and how you typically identify when you're attracted to somebody and you believe that there's compatibility in addition to chemistry. What
Hmm.
we do is a lot different. In my service, we want to be fully transparent. And so we give you photos of the people that we're expecting you to date.
Hmm.
You read a profile that was written by the other person, so you understand how they kind of view themselves in their own words. But then there's a dialogue that we have with you to address any concerns or any reservations or any doubts that you may have based upon the information that you have, and the, I would say, just your preconceived notions.
Hmm.
So people are going to form opinions based upon very little information, and quite often it's they're using the frame of their prior experience to more or less judge somebody using just their photos and just their bio. But there's a
Yeah.
lot of information that you don't necessarily know about them, which we know a lot more than you do. And so when we add more context to it, it makes it a lot easier to be comfortable with getting to know this person. And so
Mm.
if you like what you see and you like what you hear and you're interested in getting to know them better, we'll exchange phone numbers between the two of you so that you can get comfortable and acquainted over the phone before you would set up a date. And we want you to set up the date on your own terms. So
Mm.
somewhere that you both feel comfortable at a time that you're comfortable meeting. And that way there's no pressure to show up at some place that you don't necessarily even pick at a time that may not even be that convenient for you. And then you're forced into this situation where you may not feel like you have anything in common with the person. You may
Yeah.
not have any attraction to them, just based upon their appearance alone. And then it's unlikely that you're going to be able to develop a real connection,
Yeah.
from that introduction. So we think
Mm.
that the way we do it is a lot more practical and common sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to touch base on that in a little bit because I want to go deeper and really find out kinds of things that you're looking for so people can prepare if they're looking at doing matchmaking. But what do you think are some of the most misconceptions that people have about matchmaking? Is there a lot of like negative stigma about it or
It's not the stigma so much. I would say that the biggest problem that I see is women who think that they shouldn't have to pay to use the service.
yeah,
Um,
okay, I see that.
yeah, there's this antiquated notion that men are the ones that are paying for the matchmaking service and women deserve the service for free.
Yeah.
Um, Unfortunately, in the last 20 years specifically, there has been a dramatic shift in the pool of eligibility. There are far more eligible single women seeking a relationship than there are their male counterparts. The
Mm.
fact is that good men are harder to find than ever before.
Hmm. Why do you
And
think that is?
well, there's been studies that have been done on the subject, and one in particular is there's a book that was written by a colleague of mine by the name of John Berger. It's
Hmm.
called Datonomics, and he breaks down the lopsided numbers game in dating. And
Mm.
basically, what happened was it started with Title IX and the shift from universities putting all of their money predominantly into male sports, and then basically having to support female athlete scholars on the same level as they do men. So what that did is it allowed a lot more women to be able to go to school that weren't able to afford it otherwise.
Okay.
Uh, and so now that you had a lot more women going to college that weren't going before, and then you had social shifts where women weren't expected as much to just graduate high school, find someone, get married, and start having kids,
Mm-hmm.
women started to embrace the idea of going out into the world and having careers of their own and establishing their career before they settle down and get married and have kids. Well, that really created this huge imbalance between men that are out there that are getting educated and holding off on marriage until they meet someone at a point in their career where they feel that they're ready to be in a relationship, versus the women that were doing the same. And so now in college, it's basically 60% women and 40% men, which means that every year there's a graduating rate of, 3 women for every 2 men.
Mm-hmm.
And so these women that are educated and going out into the workforce and getting jobs are starting to outnumber these men. And then what happens is they start to establish themselves and do well in their careers, and they don't want to settle. And so a lot of women refuse to date men that make less money than them. And so that creates another challenge because there's just fewer and fewer men that are on your level. So the reality is that women, more than men, need to pay for matchmaking services because
Mm-hmm.
matchmakers give you a competitive edge in the marketplace. It allows you to be much more, I would say, marketable,
Okay.
because as you put yourself out there using dating apps, there's always so many people that are going to see you. But when you're using a matchmaker, they're socializing the opportunity to meet you throughout their entire network, and they're constantly looking on your behalf. So matchmakers are really about giving you that greater visibility that you
Mm-hmm.
otherwise wouldn't be able to get on your own.
Yeah. Wow. That was a great answer. That totally answered that for me. So thanks. Cause I was sitting there going, when I go to like a club or a bar, yeah, the women always get in free, right? They're like,
Yeah.
women get in free, first drinks are free and pay for the men. So I think that was our mentality as the woman is being paid for. She's being courted. She has all these things. Why should we not get to do this for free? But that was a good answer. Damn it. Okay. So let's talk about the process of how it works. You were kind of touching a little base on how each of it works. So if I came to you and I decided that I want to do this matchmaking, walk me through from like when I come to you, like what are the first steps that I would expect
Sure.
walking in the door?
So what we do is we agree on a number of introductions that you feel would be sufficient based upon your needs and your budget. The more matches that we promise you, the more expensive the service becomes. But
Okay.
once we agree on the number of matches that we're promising you, then we put it together into a DocuSign agreement. You accept the terms and conditions, you purchase it using a major credit card of some sort, and now we're in business.
Is
And
this a
so
guaranteed process, a promise, or so you guarantee you're going to match them with somebody or that you're going to give them a certain amount of matches?
that they're going to get a certain number of matches.
Okay.
And so what we do is we are very thorough in terms of vetting out the people that we're working with, right?
Okay.
So, for example, right now we have this woman who swears that she's 61 years old, but
I'm
everything
laughing already.
everything that we found through public
It was
record,
different.
it shows that she's 66. And so we're at a point where we're telling her, look, if you expect us to match you, we need to see your driver's license.
Yeah.
Okay, because we have technology that I've developed that allows us to be able to prove that someone is who they say they are. And there's a couple different ways that you can do it. You can take a knowledge-based authentication quiz, which is like one of these quizzes that say like, which one of these streets have you ever lived on? Which one of
Okay.
your cars are in your name? That sort of thing. But you can't generate the quiz unless you're using a correct name and date of birth. So in her case, she kept trying to generate the quiz and we weren't able to generate one for her. So we knew
Mm.
something was up, right? And it
Mhm.
turns out that it's the date of birth that's off. And so the other alternative that you can do is you can take pictures of your ID, and we analyze the images to make sure that they're not forged or fraudulent in any way, and that they match the templates for that particular ID, the state and the type of ID that it is. We pull the data off the front, we match it with the data that's embedded in the barcode. We make sure that it's the same, and then we require you to take a selfie, which is compared to the face that's on the ID for likeness. Uh,
Okay.
and so what we do is if you can't generate a quiz, you got to go through the document verification. And so once you've gone through this verification process, then we run a background check. And we're looking for anything criminal that might be disconcerting.
Okay.
Now, it's really interesting because we have tools that allow us to go very far back and to find things that might not have even resulted in like an actual conviction. So, an example is we have a guy that we found the other day who was arrested like 13 years ago on a charge of child cruelty. Now, he was arrested, but the case was thrown out of court. And
Okay.
so he was never prosecuted and never found guilty of a crime.
Okay.
But when you Google him, you actually see like his mugshot and like the
Oh,
news story that was about it. Now, you have to think about that. That's a huge red flag, obviously, for anybody who's going to meet this guy, and
100%.
they're going to be worried. Is this guy some kind of monster?
Mhm.
Um, we have to give people benefit of the doubt, and
Mhm.
unless it was a conviction,
Mhm.
the person's innocent.
Mhm.
You're innocent until proven guilty in this country. Now,
Mhm.
yeah, it's a bad look, and if you don't want to meet the person just because they were accused of something that was really awful, that's up to you. In his particular case, he made it clear like him and his wife were going through their separation and their divorce. He wanted her out of the house.
Mhm.
He asked her, he told her basically to leave, and she decided to call the cops on him and make up this story. And cops come and they're going to believe whatever somebody said unless you're lying to the cops, which is not their assumption.
Mhm.
And he was charged with this crime. So the fact is that people have things that go on in their past, and we do a pretty good job of finding things that might be a concern to somebody, and we call
Yeah.
people out on it. And so if we can't get to the bottom of something that we think is really important, then we simply don't represent somebody. So whether they're lying about their age or there's something in their background that seems concerning, we're really good at vetting out the misfits.
Mhm.
So that's what we do first when you join.
Okay. So let me just interrupt you there. So going back, talking about the woman that lied about her age. So where do you, I mean, did she eventually, or has she eventually gone, okay, you got me, and done it? Or at that point, if she's genuinely wanting to meet somebody and willing to spend the money, it's not cheap to do this type of service, willing to spend the money, why wouldn't you want to put your best foot forward, give everything that you got? I mean, age is, we always say it, it's just a number, you
Sure.
know? So I'm just shocked that she would be so holding her ground on that. I mean, it happens, of course, all the time on the dating sites. And my favorite is when the guy goes, oh, my age is wrong. Don't know why. They won't let me change it. You know why? You put
Yeah.
the wrong age in. Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
So,
Well, what's funny is that everybody seems to think that they're a exception to the rule.
yeah,
And whether it's a guy who's lying about his height by a few inches
they do
or
that.
a woman lying about her age by a few years, everybody seems to think, well, I
You'll never
seem
know.
taller in person, or I look younger than my age, which really is in the eye of the beholder, I
That's
think.
right.
you know
Right.
so the fact is that we're a good means of cutting through all of that misinformation that you're typically finding on the dating apps.
Yeah.
So when we represent you to somebody else, or we represent somebody to you, our guarantee is that you can rely on the information that you're getting, and that
Mm-hmm.
what you see online is what you'll get in person.
I like that. So did the mugshot guy, where do you go from there with him? Are you able to put him out there for people to meet, or have you had backlash?
I mean, it's one of those things where when we make the introduction, we're not sharing people's last names or too much information, but oftentimes when you share someone's phone number, you can look them up pretty easily. And
Yeah.
people do reverse phone searches, and then they see the person's name, and then they Google the person's, and it is what it is. We're prepared to have that conversation when the conversation arises about
Mm-hmm.
what this person was accused of. And the fact is that he has a good relationship with his daughter now, and she lives with him, and nothing happened in his opinion, in
Mm-hmm.
his defense, according to him, of course. And even when you go to the county where the event took place, there's not even any record of the arrest.
Mm.
So the fact that the arrest shows up in these old commercial databases just goes to show how hard it is to get data to disappear.
Yeah.
So we have to have that conversation if the conversation arises, but we're prepared to say, look, he was arrested 13 years ago. It didn't result in a charge. He wasn't it wasn't adjudicated through the court. It was dismissed. We have to give them the benefit of the doubt, and we think you should too.
Yeah, I like that. And eventually, if it continues to work out, I would assume they would meet the daughter. You could see for yourself, have that conversation if
Yeah.
it came down to, if it got to that point. Okay. All right. So you've done the background check. All right. I interrupted you. Go on.
No, it's okay. So now there's two options that we usually give our customers is, do you want to work with somebody who's going to help you be your best self and put your best foot forward and make the very most out of each one of the introductions? We call this person your coach.
Okay.
And do you want to work with a coach and have a coach guide you through this process? Or are you just looking to be set up and you feel like, you're doing everything that you could and should be doing? It's just about accessing the right people. Well,
Okay.
depending upon which route that we go, we'll decide what the next step is.
And
But
I
if you
assume there's a price difference.
Yes, of
Yes.
course.
Okay.
It's a little bit more expensive when you have a
The
coach involved
coach.
because
Makes
there's
sense.
another person that's involved in your process. But the coaches have tremendous experience. They're very well reviewed. They have a very great vibe that they bring to the whole experience, which really helps people get into a good headspace for making their matches. And what that means is that most of the people that go through coaching come out of it much more receptive, open-minded, flexible, easier to work with. When you start with somebody who doesn't go through any coaching, they usually have a real rigid set of criteria. They're somewhat inflexible in terms of what they're looking for, and you don't really get to know them except through trial and error. You have to try to set them up and see how they respond to the person you're matching them with in order to know if you're going in the right direction or not. So you can expect to have a greater likelihood of success sooner rather than later if you go through coaching. But if you go through matchmaking and you understand that it's a process and it takes time, then you can find eventually what you're looking for. But you may have to, excuse the expression, kiss some frogs before you find your prince.
Yeah.
So depending on which way we go, if you go with your coach will find a time to meet with you for an hour over FaceTime or Zoom for you guys to start your background process. And the coach is going to help gather more information about you, your career, your education, your family, your upbringing, what's worked for you in past relationships, what hasn't worked for you. What have you learned about yourself along the way? And what are you really looking for and not looking for in your next relationship? Whereas the matchmakers, if you just go straight into matchmaking, they're looking to build a bio on you. So they'll gather the same background details that the coach will, but they're less concerned about sort of how it's impacted you and what you've learned from the experiences. And they're more focused on, what will and won't work for you romantically.
Interesting.
So once you come out of the coaching, you're now at the same place you would have been if you just started with the matchmaking. And so we should have everything that we need to begin marketing you. We should have the photos that you gave us. We should have a profile that you gave us. We should have all of your criteria captured. And so now we start doing outreach to men that we think might be appropriate for you. So we have an extensive database that we start with. We have over 20,000 people that are active and available throughout the whole country. And so depending on where you live, we're going to contact people that are in your area first, that are closest to home, that makes the most sense. And we're going to suggest you to them. So we'll send out your photos and your profile, and we'll tell these people why we think you would be a good fit for them and vice versa. So once we've secured interest from one or two or at most three men, then what we're going to do is turn around and present them to you and say, here's some information on someone that we think would be a good fit. Here's a few of their photos. Here's their bio. This is why we think you two would be compatible. So
Oh, wait, let me stop you there because I have a couple questions. I don't want to forget. So, So pictures, did you say the person provides their pictures or you guys do a little picture photo shoot or no, you provide
No,
your own
so
pictures?
everyone has to provide their own photos, but if someone doesn't have good photos, then we will often guide them toward a photographer and give them instructions on how to take the type of photo that you're looking for. Believe it or not, it's a lot simpler than people think to have photos taken.
Yeah.
You can sit there and tell someone, I'm creating a podcast or I'm writing a blog and I need editorial looking photos that I can use. It's not meant to be like a glamour shoot or something like that.
Yeah, because you want that anyway. Yeah.
No, you're just supposed to be
Glamour
wearing,
shots.
you're just supposed to be wearing an outfit that you wouldn't mind wearing on a date. You're smiling, you're happy, you're in front of a good backdrop. There's nothing distracting. It's just you in the photo,
Yeah.
right? You can start with like a headshot or a quarter length shot, then a half shot, then a full body shot. So we're looking to get somewhere between, 4 to 6 photos of you that really show what you look like and what somebody should expect to see when you show up for a date.
Okay. Okay, I got that. And your database. So, how are these people that are in your database? These are also people that have paid to be in the matchmaking, or do you do kind of like Millionaire Matchmaker where they just have a bunch of men or women on file to basically bring you in for somebody you'd want to meet?
So it's both. So
Okay.
we everybody's in the same database, except there's people that are more of a priority and people who are less of a priority. So the people that are owed introductions and have matches remaining, they're the
Hmm.
first priority. So
Okay.
that's the first group of people that we would look at to see if we could find a match for you among the people that we owe introductions to. But
Hmm.
then if we exhaust that pool of possibilities, then we look at people that were once clients that maybe have used up all of their matches, but might still be single and interested in being set up. Then
Hmm.
we look at people who have just been brought into the database that never purchased a service to see if they're available and they might be interested. As a last
Mm.
resort, we actually go out of network and we'll recruit on behalf of a client.
Hmm.
So we'll use dating apps, we'll use social networks, we'll ask for referrals and we'll get suggestions of people that we think might be a good fit, and then we onboard that person like we would any other client. So we make sure they
Mm.
are who they say they are. We prove their age. We run their background checks. And so now we have an additional source of potential matches
Hmm.
that was beyond the database that we were initially considering.
Mm. So that's where I belong. Okay, I'm just figuring out where I would go in on that. Okay. All right. So continue on. I'm ready.
Yeah. So once you decide that you're open to meeting somebody, with your permission, we give them your phone number and then
Okay.
we'll give them yours. And this way you can get comfortable and acquainted over the phone before scheduling a time to meet. So the hope is that you'll have a conversation that is meaningful enough that you feel comfortable going out with the person. We don't
Hmm.
expect you to interview each other. We don't expect you to dig too deep. It's just an initial conversation that's meant to break the ice and dispense with formalities and just
Hmm.
find a time to get together and meet. So once you get together and meet and you see in person that they're everything that we've represented them to be, that will technically count as one of the matches that you were promised.
Okay.
So whether or not they turn out to be, a good candidate for a relationship,
That's on
that
you.
will remain to be seen.
Hmm.
But at the very least, you can feel rest assured that you weren't misled. The
Hmm.
person looked like their photos. They were who they said they were. They lived up to their profile. Whether or not that chemistry exists is, the $1 million question. That's what
Yeah.
everybody wants to know. But we rely on feedback in order to do a better job. So we want you to come back and tell us what you thought about them. We want them to come back and tell us what they thought about you. And that actually is where we came up with the idea for my TV show.
Hmm.
So when I did Tough Love from 2009 to 2013, the original idea was, can we create a dating show from a male perspective that women would want to watch that would help them understand how to date and date better, for the purpose of what everybody wants, which is to find and form a healthy relationship. You had other shows on at the time, like The Mystery Method,
Hmm.
and these shows that, The Pickup Artists, I
Hmm.
think was the name of it. And, the idea was these are platforms that were built to design, that were designed and built for men to have more success with women. So there wasn't really any shows out there that were purpose built for women to have more success with men, and that's where I came in. And
Okay.
what we realized was that each one of these introductions is somewhat like a social experiment.
Hmm.
You're going out with somebody that you both double opted into meeting, and they fit this set of criteria that you established for us. And now, after going out with them, we get this anecdotal feedback, but we get it from 2, 3, 4, 5 different men. Now, think about it. If I set you up with 5 different men,
Hmm.
all 5 of these men who don't know each other, that aren't comparing notes, that aren't working in cahoots, come back and say the same thing. You know, Steve, she's a beautiful girl, but she just can't stop talking about her podcast. And
Mhm.
it seems to me like she's already found the love of her life, and I'm always going to be second fiddle. Like
Okay.
you hear that 2, 3, 4 times.
You start to believe it.
Yeah, I mean, that's a problem, right?
Yeah.
So our job is to communicate to you what we're hearing and what we're learning from these experiences so that if anything, you have some positive takeaway and you might be able to learn from the experience in
Mhm.
some way, shape, or form and apply that as you're going back out into the world and dating on your own.
Mhm.
Hopefully, even if you don't meet the next love of your life through our service, you'll feel like it was worthwhile because you met quality people you wouldn't have otherwise had a chance to meet. You got
Mhm.
real feedback and you were able to incorporate that somehow, some way.